Hi everyone, this is Ron Cavanaugh, publisher, editor of Mosaic Literary Magazine. We're here today in the studios of AALBC.com. That's the African American Literature Book Club. We are here to interview faraichideya. Farai has a new book coming out, but she is also the author of two previous books, or three previous morning host on The Takeaway.
It's great to see you again.
Same here, same here. For those who don't know, Farai and I, and I'm sure everybody doesn't know, Farai and I took a writing class together about 6-7 years ago. And I think it's interesting because you didn't complete the class because I think you got the job on News and Notes or another similar radio. You had to go to California.
Yeah, I moved to the Bay Area to host a local show on KALW called Your Call, and lived in Berkeley, worked in San Francisco, and then I got hired by NPR.
Okay.
And then of course recently I got laid off by NPR, but that's
another.
That's
touch on that.
A horse of another color.
Right, right. So during the class, I remember you even got a chance to read one time. And is your next book, Kiss the Sky, is that based from the book that you were working on way back when?
Yes, yes. It was a whole evolution. I mean, for me it was also a spiritual moment in my life where I had taken time off from the journalism business, gone and done a fellowship in California. And when we met in the class, I had moved back from California to New York. But I figured I wanted to move back to California. I knew that I wanted to move back to California, but you know, I just needed to go back to New York and figure out what I was doing. And I wanted to start writing this novel. And taking a class at Frederick Douglass was so great for me because even though I write, and I've been writing for years, writing fiction is so different from writing nonfiction. It's a completely different exercise.
And by the time you'd taken the class, had you completed a stint at ABC already?
Yes.
That was, okay.
I worked at Newsweek, MTV, CNN, ABC. The last two I was on air on television. Then I went to Oxygen, also was on air. Then I took the time off, and then I moved back to New York and started taking those novels.
You had mentioned Oxygen, and it seems as though you have a career that, I don't know if you could say it started online, but with Pop and Politics, that was, I can so clearly remember you and Omar, or you bringing in Omar to work on this site, and how professional it looked in the 90s.
Amazing.
And I was like, is this what sites are supposed to look like? Because then, you know, it was still kind of, you know, iffy as far as the... Can you just speak about that time with Pop and Politics?
Sure. I mean, it was a moment where I was one of the youth analysts on CNN.
Okay.
I was 25 years old, traveling around the country doing political coverage, and I was like, well, there's other young black folks who want a little bit of our flavor in the world of politics. And CNN gave me a really broad audience, but I still wanted, you know, space of my own. And I knew that I could do it on the internet, and Omar did an amazing job designing Pop and Politics. And it has got to be one of the oldest continually operating blog sites in the world. It was, I started it in November of 1995.
Yeah, and it's a precursor to what we call blogs now.
Exactly.
Because back then, it was just contributors, you give people access and give them a code or whatever. But it's just so interesting how early on you kind of recognized that the internet might be a portal for young people. When other people, even the major networks, were still struggling on what the internet was and what it would be, you had already decided that it was going to go in a certain direction.
It's true, but one of the things that then happened was that Pop and Politics has been far outstripped by many other sites who moved beyond it. However, you know, it looks like we're going to change Pop and Politics started out as what I call a no profit, which was just something I did. You know, it was we never took advertising, and we never, you know, it was just something we did. And then as it became popular, it became more burdensome to run.
Yeah.
You know, because you're putting in all this work, but you know, you're not reaping anything. So then it became a nonprofit, and now we may affiliate with a company, which I can't really talk about, but a company that would allow us to really aggregate African American and multicultural blog content. Because really, if you think about something like the Huffington Post, they're primarily an aggregator.
Right.
They primarily pull in people who are already writing and have them write more.
Right.
And so why shouldn't that be done in the black space?
Right.
And so we're working on a deal with an existing entity that, you know, I just think there's so many brilliant voices out there. And Pop and Politics was pioneering.
Do you still think there's a space for a unique black voice on the internet? It seems like now, because the internet kind of democratizes the way people can use their voice, black people can almost be anywhere on the internet.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that their stories are being covered properly, but black people are everywhere. Do you think that's still a crucial element of getting the news out to people?
You know, I'm the kind of person who, I've worked in so many different types of media. And I think it's the kind of thing where you have black people who go to HBCUs and you have black people who go to non-HBCUs.
Right.
There should be both. There should be primarily black spaces on the internet, and there should be black people in non-black spaces. And that's the way that you keep things moving, is this constant dialogue. But I think sometimes, you know, the election of President Obama lifted the collective racial consciousness in America because white people had to keep up. You know, black people were like, okay, well, what about this? What about that? Is he really black? You know, what about the diaspora? Da, 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 da. And I think it's something where, you know, we so often seed things, which then move up, whether it's rock and roll, jazz, blues, you know, so many movements in literature, you know, and so those primarily African American spaces also are like the, you know, the places where the cultural DNA turns into, you know, a living, breathing culture. Sure.
Was that extended to News and Notes, which you started on as host? Were you the first host?
No, well, Tavis had the Tavis Smiley show, and then after he left NPR in frustration, they brought on Ed Gordon, who then left NPR, and I became the host. And
was that your goal, to continue that idea that black people should have a unique space, but on radio?
I will say that it was not my goal entering, but it certainly was once I got there, because I call myself the accidental host, because I have hosted many things, but I never set out to be a host.
Okay.
I think it's because, like I like to say in relationships, you know, somebody is always a little crazy in a relationship. Both people are, but if you're crazy and they're crazy, you're getting along well enough that you support each other and minimize the crazy. And so I think that my quirks are ones that are helpful to organizations in distress. And so when there is a power void, a lot of times I've come in and, you know, although News and Notes was ultimately canceled, that show was on the chopping block, like practically from day one. And we kept it alive, collectively. And I think that, you know, although ultimately it was a very hard journey, there was a lot of energy that I put into making sure that we could survive. And we did some innovative things. And yes, of course we wanted to bring the black community together. But I didn't set out to be host of the show.
How does that happen? Because I've heard someone else, I'm recommending a thing, say that also. He's just kind of like falling into job after job. People recognize your talent, they invite you to come in. Has that been the same case with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very ambitious, but I think that my ambitions have always been, I think, unusual to some people, because there's certain things that I really love. Like, I love field reporting. I love talking to people. I mean, I have a lot of different skills, and I'm not easy to put in a box. I love culture, but I love politics. You know, I can deal with all these different things, and so I'm a little eclectic and hard to pay. And so, you know, sometimes I get drafted into a position,
Yeah.
and then I'm fighting to be an individual.
Right.
So that's why I keep coming back, you right, because ultimately you are the authority. You're right.
You're in control.
Yeah.
Is that the ultimate goal for you? Like, if you are in the media, unless you're going to start a unique internet space, like how much control can you have? And is the internet an option for you?
Yes.
As far as someone who's really looking.
Right.
Because I have to be honest, I was kind of shocked when you started popping politics. Then I heard you were going to TV because you seemed like the boss. You were the boss with popping politics. But then with ABC, you're not going to be
you're not the boss.
The boss. And it just seemed like it was not a vertical, not a horizontal step, but almost like a kind of a step down. Because that's how I viewed the internet then, even then, as something above just kind of being a news reporter.
Yeah, but I think almost everyone would disagree with you.
Okay.
Because it's like at the age of, I don't know how old I was, maybe 28, I was pulling down 6 figures.
Okay, that answers the question.
And pop in politics was not going to do that for me.
Yeah.
However, pop in politics gave me a satisfaction that being a network correspondent never could.
Right.
And so I tried to do both, and sometimes I failed because, and I'm on the verge of starting a business of my own that should allow me a lot more freedom to do what I want, and also hopefully to create some jobs for all this talent that's now out on the street. I mean, some of the best minds in journalism and in almost every field are unemployed right now. But that also means that you have these building blocks to create new entities. And with my battle-scarred self from all of the different, aspects of corporate life that I've seen and of entrepreneurship, I'm trying to create a model that has aspects of bigger companies, but also course corrects for some of the things. So, it's been a hard road, but all in all, I'm glad that I've learned a lot of the things I have.
Speaking of a hard road, can you kind of touch on the whole news and notes?
I will. I mean, the reality is that Tavis left, and he set the place on fire by saying what he did. And I think that it should have been taken, although what he said had an element of anger, he was spot on about his criticisms. And
he kind of said that he wasn't receiving the support.
Exactly. Monetary or marketing. But marketing is a weakness of NPR. NPR assumes that they don't need to market. And the reality is that when you don't market, you get the same people. And usually an aging audience. And now, they're trying to, I wish NPR well, don't get me wrong.
No.
I mean, I really have, I have a lot of love for public radio and public media, and I grew up on it, but there's a lot of people who their dial doesn't go past 95. They stop when the music stops, and they're never gonna, and so there needs to be this outreach. So Tavis left, and someone in-house really needed to listen to what he said and make sense out of it and help change the organization. But instead, I think that people panicked and said, oh, we've got to cover it up. We've got to get another black person in, but then we're even more afraid of being criticized. And so, there was a lot of defensiveness. And we had to go to the mat again and again to save the show. We were always being, basically threatened with cancellation. And yet there wasn't a process for us to really get the kind of feedback that we did, or certainly not marketing or whatever. But we had a lot of victories. We went to South Carolina and covered the critical South Carolina primary, which was the first one that Obama was expected to win and did win. We covered, of course, the whole election season. We, based out of Atlanta for a week and did some great shows. Covered Katrina. I was there for 9 days. So we dug in, but ultimately, I think that NPR has a long way to go, not just in dealing with a black show, but also dealing with its own specific politics. Like I went to Berkeley and as a guest lecturer there, or visiting professional, they call it, for 3 days, and told people about what I felt the business was like, because everyone who's coming into the business is scared. And I said, look, at ABC they'd stab you in the chest, at NPR they'd stab you in the back.
Okay.
You know, that's the difference. It's like, do you want aggressive politics or do you want passive aggressive politics?
Right.
There's always politics.
Sure.
You know?
It seems as though, and there, I listen to NPR almost every day, and I think there are only 2 shows at least there were only 2 shows directly geared for the African American audience. Tell Me More and News and Notes. Now there's just one show, Tell Me More. It just seems as though if a network is broadcasting public access or public radio, they would make an effort to bring in more people. There are no Latinos that I know of, or Asian shows. So every show, and I don't want to kind of break it down as this show is a white show because it can have a broader audience than just white people, but there's no effort for multicultural audiences. But when NPR kind of sells itself as this multicultural, liberal, progressive kind of radio station, and what is that dynamic about?
You know, the reality is that Michelle Martin and Tell Me More are doing a great job, and I think they're going to broaden their mandate. You know, they have a tough job in the sense that they're, because of The Boy at NPR, they're going to be sort of the black show and sort of the multicultural show. You know, but there's a huge opportunity out there, and I think the show is doing well.
No one's in Africa anymore.
Yeah.
You know, no one is talking about, other than when they have the regular newscast. You had an African correspondent. The Takeaway does not, but excuse me, the Takeaway does. They have the newscast.
They have the BBC,
right?
And Femi,
Femi,
newscaster,
right? But that's also kind of like a critical area that's no longer going to be addressed. You know, this whole situation with Susan Checker. That's what's going on there. It's too much of a coincidence that the Prime Minister's wife gets into, or the Prime Minister and his wife get into this accident. I know I'm going off of my conspiracy theory nutcase, but there's no one here, I don't think, exploring stories like that anymore.
Yeah, I actually think it was an accident. But I also, you know, half of my family is Zimbabwe.
Right, sure.
And I've been shooting a documentary there. That's another whole story, but there's much to be said about Zimbabwe, and I've interviewed Chiang for News and Notes.
Yeah.
It was really great to talk to.
Yeah, okay, no, that's great, We're going to take a quick turn here because you do have, I'm sure, a new wonderful book coming out this May, am I correct?
You're correct.
Kiss the Sky. It's already been selected by the Essence magazine for their Book of the Month club, I guess.
Yeah,
can you tell us a little bit about the?
Sure. Yeah, it is from the soup of what I was writing when we were in class together, but I call it a pop novel with literary undercurrents. Okay. And it probably will shock some people because there's sex, drugs, rock and roll, all sorts of, you know, glitz, glamour, drama. Because, for example, the main character is nicknamed Sky, which is one reason why I use the Jimi Hendrix lyric, Kiss the Sky as the title. But she is a 30-something, early 30-something black woman who is making a comeback in the rock and roll world. And she's in a love triangle with her ex-husband, who's a drug user, who is black, biracial, trust fund baby. Half Jewish, half black, very entitled, and also very troubled. And then she starts dating her manager, who's like, you know, like the, you know, brother who's just come up, you know, in the hip hop industry. And she has different troubles with both of those men. But I think the whole Rihanna thing, there's not physical abuse in the book, but there's psychological manipulation of this character. And I just think that women, black women, rise up. Do not take this stuff. All of us who were of a certain age have been in bad relationships of one kind or the other. But it's like, I mean, I just think about the madness of going back to someone who beats you down. And although this character doesn't go through that, it's like she's got this psychological manipulation and the kind of humiliation that goes with certain unhealthy relationships. And so one of the reasons I wanted to make this a pop novel, meaning accessible, is because we just have lessons we need to learn about relationships, how to treat each other. And so it's set in the world of rock and roll, but from the black rock perspective. You know, I think we hear a lot about rock and roll from the white perspective, but there's a whole black rock movement.
Sure.
And based in New York.
Right. Were you in any way connected to that rock movement?
Only as a fan.
Oh, okay, all right.
But there's the Black Rock Coalition.
Yeah, Black Rock Coalition, that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
It's interesting, when I was reading and I kind of printed something out, the character almost sounds like you.
Well,
Book lover with
the character is very different from me, but I gave certain signifiers like Baltimore and Harvard because that's what I know. And a lot of people be like, well, did you do this? Did you do that? And it's like, no, I didn't do it. But I also believe, like, the book is primarily set in New York, but then it's also goes to Switzerland, South Africa, London, and Paris. And I've been to all those places because I can imagine a lot of things. But the settings for me have to be reality-based. And so when I talk about Baltimore, I can really talk about Baltimore. When I talk about New York, I can really talk about New York. When I talk about Switzerland, I can really talk about Switzerland. And so I think that there is universal truths about what love is, what respect is, what creativity is, that I'm trying to transmit through a very kind of sexy, provocative story. So people will read it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so important. People don't, realize that it's a beautiful book, but somebody has to read it.
Yes.
Any more nonfiction projects? Color Our Future, Don't Read the Hype, of course.
Yeah.
With the 2 previous books.
I'm probably going to update The Color of Our Future because people finally get it.
Okay.
It's like,
people are catching up.
Yes, because,
Yeah.
It's very popular as a college textbook now because this was 10 years ago that I talked about how America in the year 2050 would become majority minority. Well, they've turned that clock to 2042.
Yeah.
We've gone forward 10 years and that date has moved back 8 years, so we're getting closer and closer to that moment. And so people finally get it. They're like, oh, there's a black president. Oh, there's all these people who have one parent of one race, one parent of another race. Oh, there's all these immigrants. Oh, And so people are getting it, and I'm going to go back and do some kind of an update on that.
Will it kind of course it will, Barack Obama.
Oh, absolutely. Well, my working title is The Color of Our Future in Michelle Obama.
Right. Or the color of our now, maybe.
Yes.
Because,
I like
everything
that
is, that we kind of forecast, at least everything in your book forecast, is speeding up now, particularly since...
Can I take that title?
Yeah.
I like that.
Particularly since now that we have a black president. Did you, back then, 10 years ago, could you have imagined, a black president now?
What's funny is that I went to the inauguration with my mother, and it was really moving, and we were there, and we watched everything unfold, ran into Omar, and all these other friends of mine. And she was like literally dancing in the street. I mean, I've never seen this woman so happy. And I think the difference is that she never thought there could be a black president in her lifetime. And it wasn't that I thought that there would be, but I always thought it was possible. And I think that's the difference a generation makes. I was like, well, if the right person comes along, and he was that person. But I never thought that it was impossible. And I think it's because of the hard work that the civil rights generation put in that I thought that.
Okay, we've been speaking with faraichideya here in the AALBC studios. My name is Ron Kavanaugh, and thank you so much for joining us.
When I think about finding out what's going on in literature, AALBC.com is one of my favorite places to go because it brings authenticity to the game of being a reader.